I see that you've obviously developed really nicely and grown and obviously gotten a lot stronger and look like you're playing some good golf, so well done there. I know Mum sort of mentioned here about your lag, or we'll just call it like the width of arc coming down. So I'll talk a little bit about that, not directly about lag because I don't see that that's a major issue, but we will talk a little bit about the width in the backswing, which can definitely help to generate a little bit more loading of the club on the way down. On this swing here, I'm obviously just going to be reviewing your iron shot, but it'd be interesting to know, what the contact's like, if there are any contact issues, what might be the tendency. You definitely have a beautiful delivery here of the club, even though you might have, a bit of a wide arc coming down. You don't lose the angle at all coming into the ball. So I guess for Mum, this is an important one because most people are looking to, if you want to use the word load or add lag to the club, because they're looking to improve their impact in some capacity or speed. It doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't always work that way. So for me, I want to talk a little bit more about the arc width on the way back and how that sort of can be influenced on the way down. So let's jump in here, and I'm gonna place Lydia Ko up against you just to show you what kind of she does in her backswing and how that influences her downswing. Okay, so I'm sure you're very familiar with Lydia Ko. Not a huge girl as far as her build, but she's really developed her strength, I'd say more particularly over the last few years, and starting to hit the ball quite a sizable distance for her build. And so a couple of things I would say that I'd like to kind of add to what you do. And the first one is just to add a little bit of foot flare. Now, all that foot flare is just really turning the feet out very slightly, not too much, and just making sure that the knees are basically pointing in the same direction. So that does a couple of things. It adds some stability, and it also allows some freedom to rotate. So as you get stronger, definitely rotation is going to become an important part, of how you move and being able to do that kind of freely. And the other thing I would also like to see is just to get your head position slightly further back. So a good way to think about it is just feel like your right ear is a little bit closer to the ground. Now I'll demonstrate this in a video as a follow-up in the coming days, but let's just kind of highlight those areas first, and so the knee would be slightly in this position here, or slightly pointed. This is exaggerated, but let's just say slightly pointed outwards towards the toe when you flare it out. So what we're going to look at here with Lydia Ko is, we'll call this her width on the way back, or the arc that she creates on the way back. So as I take her through here, and we'll stop her at left arm parallel, and we'll stop you at left arm parallel. Okay, so what we'll notice about you, or your position here, just bring that in a little bit, is you've got the club, or I'll take two things here. You've got your right elbow, which is already sort of folded here. Just change the angle. Okay, so you've got your right elbow, which is pretty much already folded a full 90 degrees from the setup position. And really, we're looking to have that a little bit wider, especially as we get into longer clubs. So if you look at Lydia Ko here, we see that her width of her right arm is probably something like about 30 degrees more than yours. Ideally, the right arm should be around 90 degrees at the top of the swing, but you've pretty much already created that halfway back here. And what that does is it starts to get, we'll just say the arc of the club, or the width that you create in the backswing a little narrower. So as we kind of get to about this point here, I'm just going to draw or mark a little spot on the club there, a little circle. And we'll see with Lydia's, her club's going to almost disappear out of the screen here. See if I can bring her down and circle her club head as well. Okay, and then we'll bring her back up there. All right. So the reason why that's happening is mainly because of the right arm and a little bit of where your right elbow position is again, which I'll talk about that as we go along. I would say your wrist condition is fairly similar. And now to explain how this works, because she has a wider arc, her right arm is, let's just say it's going to be a little less bent at that point. It's probably only fully flexing or fully bending somewhere. Let me actually take away some of these markings here. It's only going to fully bend right about at the end range of her swing. That's where she'll get to 90 degrees. Now, on the way down, as she kind of presses forward and she opens up her lower body, she can, what we call, load her right arm, and certainly she gets a little bit more stress there through her wrists. The opposite really happens to you. So, you know, as you get to the top here, your club goes from this kind of narrow position and it's trying to find some space on the way down, and it kind of gets a lot wider there. So if we looked at your downswing arc compared to the backswing, I'll just draw a line here. This would be your downswing arc, and that would be Lydia Coe's. And if you remember, which I've lost my little circle there, but I'll try and redraw that in there. Stop it about there. Okay. Right, so we see as she transitions, a very different look there. I would say a lot more dynamic as she starts down, and she's really starting to use, you know, her lower body, maybe in a slightly more aggressive way. So again, I wouldn't say that you've lost your lag, you just have a wider arc on the way down because of the nature of the backswing. Just to again highlight what I sort of mentioned at the start of the session, both of you have really beautiful impact alignments. So I'm just trying to match these up here. You know, there's no issues there at all, you know, with how you release the club, how you're turning through the shot. There's lots and lots of good stuff here that, you know, I really don't want to touch, and we're just going to let that develop. But I think what we can definitely do is just create a little bit of a framework for the backswing, so we can start to create a little wider arc on the way back. And I would just say, just naturally let nature take its course on the downswing. From my experience, because you're pretty athletic, you're pretty intuitive with how you use the golf club, I don't want to give you any downswing feels. I feel what I'd prefer to do for you is give you a sense of creating a little bit more width in the backswing, show you how to use, let's just say, your trunk, your core area, to transport the club into a little wider position, and then let's naturally see what happens on the way down. From my experience, you know, dealing with your type of build, etc., we'll naturally find that you can load the club a little bit better on the way down. It shouldn't be a conscious thing, in my opinion. It should happen through sort of natural forces and a good position at the top. And that's going to just really give you that little bit more speed over time coming into the golf ball. But follow-up video, which is just really to highlight some of the key points that I mentioned in the analysis, and just give you some things to kind of get started and work on. I'm going to start with the setup first, because it's fairly simple. And then I'll kind of move to some exercises that we're going to do for the driver swing and creating a little bit more width, as I explained. So a couple of points we noticed, with Lydia Ko, and that was a little bit of foot flare. The reason why we see foot flare with golfers is actually just to allow them to kind of rotate a little bit more freely. It just allows some kind of freedom in how we kind of rotate or move the hips. So, in your case, the right foot's going to be turned out just a little bit. We'll call it 10 degrees, and the left can be something like 20 degrees. But just allow a little bit more opening with the knees also in that direction. And the other thing I mentioned with your head, it does tend to be, we'll just call it like tilted or cocked a little bit to the left side here, which can often limit how we move away. And one of the key points that I emphasized, in the analysis was width. So if we're trying to get more width, it's definitely easier to do it if we have our head a little bit more in line with the chest versus this way, which kind of is going to restrict how our upper body moves. So in your case, we want the head just slightly angled. I mentioned a good thought or feel is allowing your right ear to be a little bit lower than the left in this fashion here. And that also helps in how we're trying to kind of attack the driver as far as like hitting up on the ball. So that would be the setup. Really small adjustments, but one that are going to certainly help in how we're trying to use the driver. Now, I've got a bunch of medicine balls here behind me. Haven't got someone with me, but I'm going to kind of demonstrate the feeling that I want you to have. Now, something like a 1 or 2 kilogram medicine ball is good for you. Probably 1's a good start. Just enough so when you can hold it, you can kind of feel that something's there. Now, if I was going to stand in my golf posture and sort of toss this medicine ball, to someone on the right side of me, I guess the analogy would be, am I going to do it where I would look something like this, where I'm very kind of folded and narrow, or am I going to do it where I create a little bit of width or space away from me? And that's really kind of the essence of what we're trying to work on with you. So, taking a medicine ball, we can feel some weight. And again, this is 2 kgs. You're going to probably do pretty well with about 1, and just create a little bit of momentum first towards the target side, and then kind of tossing this thing away. Where you see, it's really my chest and my rib cage that is getting that momentum away from me. Also with my head, slightly angled this way, it's much easier for my body to move in that direction. Now, again, we're not throwing our body way off to the right or anything like that, but we're just trying to get this chest and head to move in a manner where we can create some more width. So again, if I let that ball go right about here, and I kind of threw it over to someone in front of me, you can see that my right arm has some space away from my side. I'm not kind of folded in too much, which creates essentially for you a little bit of a narrow looking backswing with that kind of wider downswing. And again, in golf, it's often a reaction on the downswing to what the backswing's done. It's often, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So we see some narrow to wide kind of look as you're kind of coming through there. So when we get to the driver, without the medicine ball, we're basically trying to create a same feel. So I would start a little forward here, and again, feel like the chest is like transporting the arms into this position here. So, as a look, halfway back, we want to see that the driver's further away from you, not in this kind of position here where it gets like really, really narrow. So in that case, we can start to get a wider look here halfway back. And I would even make some swings or hit some drivers where you went back halfway. Again, feel like the club head's further away, feel like the right arm's further away from you. And from there, you can just kind of turn to the top and go through. So we'll start with that.